Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was enhanced with cybernetic implants beyond Quirks. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind on the rooftop was a lonely thing. It whipped around Izuku Midoriya, tugging at the sleeves of his black gakurin, a mournful sigh that seemed to echo the cavernous emptiness that had just been carved into his chest. Below, the city of Muzidafa hummed with life, a vibrant tapestry of noise and motion, but up here, in the shadow of a chain-link fence, the world had gone silent. All that remained was the reedy whistle of the breeze and the thundering, ragged beat of his own heart. All might was gone. The skeletal form of the symbol of peace had descended the stairs, leaving behind a plume of steam and the shattered fragments of a 14-year-old boy's soul. The words still hung in the air, colder and sharper than any villain's blade. It's not bad to dream. But you have to be realistic. Without a quirk, you can't be a hero. Izuku's knees gave out. He didn't fall so much as crumple, his body folding in on itself as if the strings holding him upright had been snipped. His hands, trembling violently, clutched at the notebook pressed against his chest. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. The cover was slightly damp, the ink of All Might's signature, a treasure he had coveted for a decade, now just a blurry, black stain. The sharp, bold lines of the hero's autograph had been scrawled over his own frantic, childish drawing. It felt like a desecration. A final, cruel joke. He had asked the question. The one question he had carried like a prayer on his lips and a stone in his gut his entire life. He had finally asked it to the one person whose answer truly mattered, and that answer had been an execution. A dry, choked sob ripped its way out of his throat. It was a horrible, grating sound. The sound of a dream dying. He pressed the notebook to his face, the smell of paper and cheap ink filling his senses. For years, these notebooks had been his shield, his purpose. Every analysis, every sketch, every mumbled observation was a testament to his dedication. He couldn't punch through walls, he couldn't fly, he couldn't conjure fire from his palms, but he could think. He could analyze. He could understand. He had convinced himself that was enough, that it had to be enough. He had been a fool. The world he loved, the world of heroes, was a grand, exclusive club with a single, unwritten rule on its door: quirk holders only. He was on the outside, his nose pressed against the glass, and All Might had just drawn the curtain closed. He didn't know how long he stayed there, a pathetic heap on the grimy concrete. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, colors that seemed to mock the gray, featureless landscape of his future. Eventually, his legs, stiff and numb, managed to push him upright. He walked to the edge of the roof, his fingers curling around the cold, unforgiving metal of the fence. He looked down at the city, at the tiny cars and tinier people. For a terrifying, fleeting moment, he understood the appeal of a final, desperate leap. It would be so easy. A single step, a brief flight, and then, nothing. The pain would be gone. The shame would be gone. The gaping void where his dream used to be would be filled with concrete. The thought was a jolt of ice in his veins, shocking him out of his stupor. No. His mom. He couldn't do that to her. He couldn't let her find him as a stain on the pavement. Another tragic headline in a world already full of them. With a final, shuddering breath, he turned away from the edge. He picked up his yellow backpack, its cheerful color an insult to his mood, and shuffled toward the stairwell door. Each step was heavy, as if his shoes were filled with lead. The dream was dead. Now, all that was left was to carry the corpse home. The first sign that the universe had one more cruelty in store for him was the sound of an explosion. It wasn't the clean, contained blast of a construction site demolition. It was a wet, concussive boom, followed by the panic screams of civilians. Izuku, walking on autopilot through a familiar underpass, flinched. His mind, so accustomed to a decade of hero chasing, instinctively kicked into gear before he could stop it. Villain attack. Location: Takoba Shopping District. Proximity: 200 meters. The thought was automatic, a ghost of a habit he no longer had any right to. He should have kept walking. He should have turned down another street, gone home, and let the heroes handle it. It wasn't his problem. It could never be his problem. But his feet, traitorous and stupid, carried him forward. He rounded the corner and joined the throng of onlookers held back by a police line. The scene was chaos. A writhing, monstrous form made of green, viscous sludge was rampaging in the middle of the street. It had two malevolent yellow eyes and a maw that stretched into a grotesque, jeering smile. Heroes were on the scene. Kamui Woods was evacuating civilians, Death Arms was trying to land a punch on the fluid body, and Backdraft was desperately trying to contain the fires the villain was setting. Izuku's blood ran cold. It was him. The sludge villain. The one All Might had saved him from just an hour ago. The bottle must have fallen from his pocket during their rooftop meeting. This was his fault. This chaos, this destruction, it was all his fault. The thought was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. And then he saw it. Thrashing inside the suffocating mass, a pair of furious, terrified red eyes. Spiky ash blonde hair. A familiar school uniform. Kaken. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Bakugo Katsuki, explosive, arrogant, cruel Kaken, was drowning. His hands sparked with desperate, muffled explosions, but the sludge simply absorbed the blasts, tightening its grip. He was being suffocated, his quirk being used against him to cause more destruction. Izuku watched, frozen. The pros weren't getting through. Death Arms' punches were useless. Kamui Woods couldn't get a grip. The villain was a nightmare of fluid dynamics, an impossible enemy for their specific skill sets. Izuku's mind, the one thing he had always trusted, began to churn against his will. He's fluid, but he has solid parts, the eyes, the teeth. That's his real body. Weak points. He's susceptible to pressure changes. A high-pressure wind attack could disperse him. Or a focused freezing attack. All Might could do it with a single punch. The wind pressure alone. But All Might wasn't here. He had reached his limit. Izuku had used up the last of the hero's time. This was his fault. His fault. His fault. He looked at Kaken again. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. In that flicker of crimson, Izuku didn't see the bully who had tormented him for a decade. He didn't see the arrogant rival who told him to take a swan dive off a roof just this morning. He saw a terrified kid. He saw someone who needed help. And then, his legs were moving. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a primal, idiotic impulse, the final twitch of a dead dream. Before he could process it, he had ducked under the police tape and was sprinting, his worn red sneakers slapping against the pavement. Kid! Stop! Get back here! A hero yelled. The world narrowed to a tunnel. At the end of it was Kaken. Izuku's mind, his only weapon, went into overdrive. What can I do? I have nothing. I'm quirkless. Useless. He unslung his backpack, a desperate, pathetic plan forming in the space of a heartbeat. It wasn't a plan for victory. It was a plan for a single second. A single breath. Take this! He screamed, his voice thin and reedy. He swung the backpack and hurled it with all his might. It sailed through the air and struck the villain squarely in the eye. The heavy weight of his textbooks and notebooks, the very symbols of his failed ambition, made the creature roar in pain and surprise. Its grip on Bakugo loosened for a barest fraction of an instant. It was enough. Bakugo gasped, taking in a desperate, shuddering lungful of air. Kaken! Izuku screamed, clawing at the sludge, his fingers sinking into the disgusting, slimy mass. It felt like trying to dig through thick, cold mud. What the hell are you doing, Deku? Bakugo choked out, his voice a mixture of fury and terror. Get away from me! I couldn't just stand there and watch you die! Izuku sobbed, his nails scraping uselessly. He looked at Bakugo's face, at the desperation there. You looked like you were asking for help. That was all he could say before a massive shadow fell over them. A booming, familiar voice echoed through the street, a sound that was both a miracle and a condemnation. I really am pathetic. All Might, in his magnificent hero form, stood there, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Detroit smash! A hurricane of wind pressure tore through the alley. The sludge villain was atomized, scattered into 1,000 harmless droplets as the sky itself seemed to change, dark clouds gathering and releasing a sudden downpour. Rain began to fall, mixing with the sweat and tears on Izuku's face. He was on his knees, panting, staring at the pavement. He had done it. He had moved. He had saved, no. He had done nothing. He had run in, gotten in the way, and forced an injured All Might to push himself past his limit. The aftermath was not a celebration. As the press swarmed All Might, a different kind of attention turned on Izuku. "What were you thinking, kid?" Death Arms barked, his face a mask of anger. "That was a stunt for the morgue. You could have gotten yourself and the hostage killed." Kamui Woods nodded, his wooden features stern. "We're professionals for a reason. Your interference was reckless and endangered everyone. You have no quirk, do you? What did you possibly think you could accomplish?" The words were like slaps to the face. Reckless. Interference. Quirkless. He stood there, dripping wet and trembling, as the heroes he had admired his entire life berated him for his own suicidal stupidity. The crowd whispered, their gazes a mixture of pity and contempt. He was a spectacle. The quirkless wannabe. Then came the final blow. Bakugo, who had been checked over by the paramedics, stomped over to him, his face contorted in a furious scowl. "Deku!" The name was a venomous hiss. Izuku flinched. "Don't you ever do that again!" Bakugo snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "I didn't need your help. I didn't need saving. You didn't do anything. You just got in the way and made me look weak. You hear me? You're a pebble. A worthless, quirkless nobody. Stay out of my way." He turned and stalked off without another word, leaving Izuku standing alone in the rain, the scorn of the heroes and the hatred of his childhood friend washing over him in a freezing wave. This was it. Rock bottom. A place so deep and dark he wasn't sure the sun existed anymore. He was a failure not just in his dreams, but in reality. A liability. A joke. His walk home was a blur of gray concrete and blurred city lights. He was numb, a walking ghost. The scolding of the heroes, the whispers of the crowd, Bakugo's final, cutting words, they all swirled into a toxic soup in his head. All Might hadn't even looked at him before he was swept away by reporters. Of course not. Why would he? Izuku had only confirmed the hero's assessment. He was a liability, not an asset. A boy with a death wish and no power to back it up. He was so lost in his own miserable thoughts that he didn't notice the figure leaning against the wall in the alleyway he was cutting through. He almost walked right past them, an interesting tactical choice, throwing the bag. The voice was female, sharp and crisp as shattering glass. It cut through his depressive haze with startling clarity. Izuku stopped, startled, and looked up. A woman stood there, arms crossed, regarding him with an unnervingly intense gaze. She was tall and lean, dressed in a practical, dark gray pantsuit that looked more like something from a sci-fi movie than a business office. Her hair was stark white, cut in a severe, asymmetrical bob, and her eyes were a piercing, intelligent shade of amethyst. They weren't looking at him with pity or scorn. They were looking at him like a complex equation, something to be analyzed and solved. "You identified the villain's primary sensory organ and targeted it with a projectile to create a momentary distraction," she continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "It was a suboptimal solution born from extreme physical limitations, but the strategic underpinning was sound. You created an opening. Inefficient, but logical." Izuku stared at her, bewildered. Who are you?" "My name is Dr. Aristhorn," she said, pushing herself off the wall. She took a step closer, and Izuku instinctively took a step back. She moved with a quiet, predatory grace that set his teeth on edge. "And I was in the crowd today. I saw the entire pathetic spectacle." Izuku flinched. "Then you saw me get in the way." I was just being stupid." "No," she said, her voice sharp. "You were being heroic. The professionals were the ones being stupid. They treated a fluid dynamics problem like a bar fight. Their approach was predicated entirely on the brute force application of their quirks, with zero tactical flexibility. They were failing. You saw it, didn't you?" Izuku's throat was dry. He could only manage a small, jerky nod. "Your analysis was correct," she stated as if it were a proven fact. "Your execution was clumsy because you lacked the proper tools. A common engineering problem. The flaw wasn't in the design, it was in the material. She gestured vaguely at him. The material, in this case, being your fragile, baseline human body. Izuku had no idea what to say. This woman spoke like one of his textbooks come to life. I have a proposition for you, Izuku Midoriya, she said, and the sound of his own name from her lips sent a shiver down his spine. How did she know his name? How do you? Finding the name of a middle schooler who caused a public disturbance is trivial, she cut him off dismissively. That is not what's important. What is important is the choice you are about to make. She gestured down the alley. Follow me. Your life as you know it has reached its conclusion. I am here to offer you a new one. Against his better judgment, a flicker of something, not hope, but a desperate, morbid curiosity, ignited in his chest. He had nothing left to lose. He followed her. She led him not to a car, but to a plain, windowless black van parked at the end of the alley. The doors slid open with a near-silent hiss, revealing an interior that was anything but plain. It was a mobile command center, lit by the cool blue glow of holographic displays and humming with the low thrum of powerful electronics. She slid into one of the chrome chairs and gestured for him to sit opposite her. He did so hesitantly, feeling like a stray animal in a sterile laboratory. Tell me, Mr. Midoriya, she began, her amethyst eyes locking onto his. What do you think of Quirks? The question was so unexpected it left him speechless. They're amazing. They let people do incredible things. They let them be heroes. Wrong, she snapped, the word like a whip crack. They are a chaotic, unreliable genetic lottery. A biological accident we have fetishized into a new form of aristocracy. For every All Might, there are 1,000 citizens whose quirk is the ability to sweat glitter or bend their thumbs backwards. For every endeavor, there is a child whose body is destroyed by their own power because their biology cannot handle the strain. It is inefficient. It is messy. It is nature's sloppy, first draft. She leaned forward, her expression one of cold, burning passion. Humanity did not achieve greatness by waiting for evolution to grant it gifts. We did not wait for gills to explore the oceans, we built submarines. We did not wait for wings to conquer the skies, we built airplanes. Our greatest strength has never been our biology, it has been our intellect. Our ability to see a limitation and engineer a solution. To innovate. To overcome. She paused, letting her words sink in. Izuku's mind was reeling, trying to process this radical, almost heretical philosophy. I witnessed your actions today, Thorne continued, her voice softer now, but no less intense. When everyone else saw a quirkless child committing suicide, I saw something else entirely. I saw a strategic mind trapped in a cage of flesh and bone. I saw a spirit with the indomitable will of a true hero, shackled to a body that could not obey its commands. That, Izuku Midoriya, is the greatest tragedy of all. She waved a hand, and a holographic display shimmered to life between them. It was a complex, three-dimensional schematic of a human figure, overlaid with intricate layers of wiring, metallic structures, and power conduits. The quirk-centric establishment I once worked for called my theories heresy. They believed that humanity's future lay in breeding and genetic manipulation, in praying the genetic lottery would bless them with stronger children. They cast me out for suggesting a different path. She pointed a single, elegant finger at the hologram. I believe in a future built not by chance, but by design. Izuku stared at the image, mesmerized and horrified. It was a blueprint for a cyborg. I am offering you a choice, Dr. Thorne said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. You can walk out of this van, go home, and live out your days as a baseline human in a world of demigods. You can accept your fate as a footnote, a statistic of the 20% born without power. You can be realistic. She spat the word like a curse. Or, she said, and the hologram zoomed in, showing the interface between a nerve ending and a micro-thin filament of wire. You can become the prototype. You can allow me to give you the tools your spirit has been screaming for. I can rebuild you. I can give you the strength of 100 men, the senses of a hawk, the processing speed of a supercomputer. I can turn your body into the single most advanced piece of technology on this planet. I can give you the power to be the hero you were always meant to be. The offer hung in the air, impossibly heavy. This was insane. This was something out of a comic book, a dark, gritty one, not the bright, hopeful ones he grew up with. This woman was offering to mutilate him, to turn him into a machine. But power. The power to save people. The power to stand on the same stage as everyone else. The power to finally make his dream a reality. What's the catch? Izuku asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Thorn's expression was grim. The catch is everything. The procedure will be excruciating. The recovery will be a living hell. Your body will become a fusion of flesh and steel, something that is either and both. You will cease to be fully human. The world, if they ever found out, would see you as a monster, an abomination, an unnatural hero. You will be alone, a class of one. She swiped her hand, and the hologram changed, showing the full designation, Ares Protocol. Beneath it, a list of components scrolled by: myomer-weave musculature, reinforced adamantite skeleton, synaptic accelerator CPU, integrated sensory suite, microfusion core. I will not lie to you, Izuku Midoriya. This path will be forged in pain and isolation, she warned, her eyes boring into him. I am offering you a crown of thorns. But it comes with a kingdom. Izuku looked down at his own hands. They were trembling again. They were small, scarred from years of clumsy accidents, and utterly useless. These were the hands that couldn't save Kaken, the hands that couldn't even properly hold a dream. He thought of All Might's pitying smile. He thought of Bakugo's sneering rage. He thought of the pro's condescending lectures. He thought of a lifetime of being told he was less, that he was worthless, that he should just give up. He thought of the look in Kaken's eyes. The look of someone asking for help. And he realized, with a sudden, chilling clarity, that he was already in a living hell. Dr. Thorne was just offering him a different one. A hell where he could fight back. A hell where he could win. He slowly clenched his shaking hands into fists. The trembling stopped. He looked up from his own inadequate flesh and met the doctor's amethyst gaze. The despair in his heart had not vanished, but it had been burned away at the edges by a new, terrifying fire. It was the cold, hard fire of resolve. I'll do it. The black van was a void on wheels, swallowing the city's vibrant light and noise. For Izuku, it was a mobile coffin carrying him away from the life he knew. He had sent one last, gut-wrenching text to his mother, staying at a friend's to study for the UA exam. A special cram school. Might be a few weeks. I love you. Every letter was a lie, a tiny shard of glass in his heart. Dr. Thorne had watched him type it, her expression unreadable. She called it a necessary deception, the first of many. They drove for what felt like hours, descending into the industrial bowels of the city, a place of forgotten warehouses and skeletal metal frameworks silhouetted against a polluted sky. The van pulled into a derelict shipping depot, its corrugated metal walls weeping rust. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a ramp that plunged deep into the earth. The van descended, the roar of its engine echoing in the concrete tunnel, and the last sliver of the outside world was sealed away. They were in her sanctuary. Her laboratory. It was not the mad scientist's lair of fiction, filled with bubbling beakers and Jacob's ladders. It was something far more terrifying in its stark perfection. The space was a vast, cavernous cylinder, its walls a seamless expanse of brushed steel. The air was cold, filtered, and smelled of ozone and antiseptic. The only light came from recessed LED strips that cast a flat, shadowless white glare on the polished concrete floor. In the center of this sterile cathedral of science stood the altar, a multi-armed surgical platform, a gleaming chrome and white enamel monstrosity that looked like a mechanical spider poised over an operating table. This place was the antithesis of everything Izuku had ever known. His bedroom was a shrine to the bright, primary colors of heroism. This lab was a monochrome tomb, a place where dreams and flesh were rendered down to their base components. Welcome to the forge, Izuku Midoriya, Dr. Thorne said, her voice echoing slightly in the immense space. This is where you will be unmade, and then remade. There was no time for second thoughts. He was stripped of his clothes and given a thin, paper-like gown. He was subjected to a battery of scans and tests, his body mapped and measured down to the micron. Thorne moved with a focused, almost obsessive energy, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces, her amethyst eyes alight with the fire of a creator on the cusp of her masterwork. She was not a doctor preparing a patient, she was an engineer reviewing a blueprint. When the time came, he lay down on the cold table beneath the mechanical arachnid. The arms of the surgical platform whirred to life, their chrome limbs unfolding with unnerving grace. One arm held a pneumatic injector. The anesthetic will render your nervous system inert, but your consciousness may drift, Thorne explained, her face a cool mask of professionalism. The process is extensive. We will be replacing your entire skeletal structure, weaving myomer filament through every major muscle group, and integrating the central processor with your spinal cord and brain stem. It will not be pleasant. Try to remember why you are here. The injector hissed against his neck. A profound coldness spread through his veins, a creeping winter that stole the feeling from his limbs. The world dissolved into a gray fog. But Thorne was right. He did not find the solace of unconsciousness. He drifted. The surgery was not a single event, but a fractured eternity. A symphony of scalpels and lasers played out on the canvas of his body. He was a silent passenger in his own desecration, his mind an untethered kite in a hurricane of pain and memory. The grinding of a cyberdermatome slicing through bone, the high-pitched whine of a drill. He's on the playground. Kakin and his friends are standing over him, their faces twisted into cruel sneers. Smoke curls from Kakin's palms. You're so useless, Deku! A quirkless nobody! The laughter echoes, sharp and painful, mixing with the whine of the drill in his ears. The cold, invasive touch of metallic claws retracting his flesh, the hiss of a plasma torch cauterizing a severed artery. His mother Inko is crying. Her face is buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm sorry, Izuku! I'm so sorry! The words she spoke when the doctor confirmed his quirkless status. The words that had haunted him for a decade. The apology that was never for his pain, but for his deficiency. The cauterizing hiss sounds like her tears sizzling on a hot plate. A sudden, blinding jolt of agony as a neural lace is threaded along his spinal column. A phantom fire racing through nerves that are no longer entirely his. He's on the rooftop. All Might's skeletal form stands before him, a specter of his crushed hopes. Without a quirk, you can't be a hero. The words are a physical blow, a jolt of pure despair that mirrors the fire in his spine. The dream dies, and in its place, a cold, hard vacuum forms. The flashes came faster and faster. The sterile reality of the operating room blurred with the raw emotion of his past. The rhythmic thump-thump of his own heart monitor became a frantic drumbeat counting down the last moments of his humanity. He felt his ribs being cracked open, his sternum lifted away. He saw, with a horrifying, detached clarity, a mechanical claw lower a glowing, spherical object into his chest cavity. A microfusion core. His new heart. There was a final, blinding surge of white-hot pain, a cacophony of data and agony that threatened to tear his very consciousness apart. A flatline tone cut through the noise, long and mournful. Izuku Midoriya died on that table. And then, with the soft, rising hum of a contained star igniting, something else was born. Consciousness returned not as a gentle dawn, but as a system boot-up. It was jarring, alien. The first thing he was aware of was not sight or sound, but data. A torrent of information flooded his mind. System boot. OK, biometrics. Stable. Fusion core. 24.7% output. Nominal. Neural interface. Synchronizing. He opened his eyes. The world was loud. Not in sound, but in information. The white ceiling of the lab was no longer just a white ceiling. A translucent green overlay, a heads-up display, was projected directly onto his vision. Lines of text and schematics flickered at the periphery. A targeting reticle, a small, pulsing circle, hovered in the center of his view. He looked at one of the overhead light fixtures, and a box of text appeared beside it. Object, high-efficiency LED panel. Luminosity, 8,500 lumens. Power draw, 72 W. Structural integrity, 99.8%. He blinked, but the overlay remained. It was part of him. He slowly turned his head, and the HUD swiveled with his vision, a constant, overwhelming stream of analysis on everything he saw. Then came the sound. He could hear the low, 60s cycle hum of the facility's power grid. He could hear the whisper of the air circulation system, the individual fans whirring miles away in the ductwork. He could hear the faint, rhythmic beat of a heart. Thorns, from across the room, a soft thump-thump against the background noise. He could hear the infinitesimal skittering of a dust mite on the floor 10 feet away. It was a symphony of noise that threatened to drown him. He tried to sit up, and a new sensation hit him. A deep, resonant hum vibrated in the center of his chest. It was a feeling of immense, coiled power, a low thrum that was as foreign as the HUD in his eyes. He placed a hand on his sternum. The skin was smooth, seamless, but beneath it, he could feel the faint warmth and the steady vibration of the microfusion core. His new heart. It did not beat. It hummed. Don't move too suddenly, Dr. Thorne's voice cut through the sensory chaos. To his new ears, her voice was a complex tapestry of frequencies and decibels. A small waveform monitor even appeared on his HUD, analyzing her speech patterns. Vocal analysis, tone, neutral. Stress level, low. Emotional state, clinical detachment. He looked at her, standing by a console. The HUD immediately went to work. Subject Dr. Eris Thorne. Biometrics, heart rate, 72 BPM. Respiration, 16 br/min. Body temp, 37.1 degrees Celsius. Analysis. Subject is calm, baseline readings. What is all this? Izuku's own voice sounded strange, a recording played back through a high-fidelity speaker. His HUD analyzed it, too. Vocal analysis, tone, disoriented. Stress level high. Emotional state, fear, confusion. That is your new reality, Thorne said, walking towards him. Her footsteps were crisp, precise clicks on the concrete. Your sensory suite is currently running at maximum input. Your brain is not yet equipped to filter the data stream. We will calibrate it. For now, focus on my voice. Command, audio filter, focus target Thorne, suppress ambient level 9. The words felt strange in his mind, but he thought them, focused on the intent. Instantly, the overwhelming cacophony of the lab faded into a dull background murmur. Thorne's voice became crystal clear, isolated. The relief was so profound it made him dizzy. Better? She asked. He nodded slowly. The things I'm seeing. Your heads-up display. Integrated into your optic nerves. Command, HUD opacity, 20%. It will make it less intrusive. He thought the command, and the green overlay faded to a faint, ghostly transparency. The world looked almost normal again, albeit with a faint digital ghosting at the edges of his vision. He looked down at his body. He was covered by a thin sheet, but he could see the changes. His skin was pale, crisscrossed with faint, almost invisible seam lines where the subdermal plating had been installed. He flexed his fingers. They moved with perfect, silent precision. He felt powerful and utterly alien. A ghost in his own bones. The procedure was a success, Thorne stated, pulling up his vitals on a floating holographic screen. All systems are online. The biological components are showing some signs of shock, which is to be expected, but the cybernetics are compensating. You are, for all intents and purposes, a new organism. Over the next several hours, as Izuku lay on the table, Thorne gave him the full, unflinching tour of his new body. She spoke with the pride of an artist unveiling her masterpiece. Your foundation is the reinforced skeleton. A proprietary carbon-adamantite alloy. It can withstand the impact of an anti-material rifle round. Woven through your musculature are billions of myomer weave filaments. They contract with electrical impulses, mimicking and vastly amplifying the function of organic muscle. At peak output, you can lift approximately 40 metric tons. However, she warned, doing so generates immense heat and drains the core at an exponential rate. Your limits are no longer fatigue, but energy consumption and thermal regulation. She pointed to his head. The most critical component is the synaptic accelerator and tactical CPU. It's integrated directly with your brain stem. It intercepts your thoughts at the speed of light, allowing you to process information at a rate no organic brain can match. Your old habit of muttering your analyses? That was the sign of a powerful processor trapped by the slow, inefficient interface of human speech. Now, that entire process is internal, instantaneous. You can run thousands of combat simulations, ballistic trajectories, and structural analyses in the time it takes an ordinary person to blink. This was the part that truly stunned him. His greatest insecurity, the weird muttering that everyone made fun of, was actually the key. Thorne had seen it not as a flaw, but as a symptom of an untapped gift. The integrated sensory suite is what you are experiencing now, she continued. Your eyes can see across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, thermal, infrared, ultraviolet. Your ears are variable frequency acoustic sensors. You have olfactory sensors that can analyze chemical compositions in the air. You are a walking forensics lab. Finally, she tapped his chest gently. And this is all powered by the microfusion core. It's self-sustaining, drawing hydrogen isotopes from trace moisture in the air. It's your heart, your life. It is also, potentially, a small bomb. Damage to the containment field would be catastrophic. The subdermal plating beneath your skin will protect it from most conventional threats, but you are not invincible. Powerful quirks could still damage you. He absorbed the information, his new CPU filing it away with perfect clarity. He was a weapon. A marvel of engineering. But as he sat there, the hum in his chest a constant reminder of his new reality, a single, devastatingly human thought surfaced. My mom. He whispered. Thorne's expression remained neutral. Your mother believes you have been accepted into a highly exclusive, live-in program at the Thorne Institute for Advanced Sciences, a preparatory school for future tech prodigies. A full scholarship. All communication will be routed through me to prevent tracking. You will be allowed scheduled, monitored calls. It is a clean, simple lie. It is necessary to protect her, and to protect my work. The cold pragmatism of it was another blow. He was truly cut off. A ghost to his old life. The next 10 months were a crucible. The time he would have spent finishing middle school and waiting for the UA exam, he spent in Thorne's underground forge, learning to be human again. Or rather, learning to pilot the human-shaped machine he now inhabited. His first attempt to walk was a disaster. He put too much force into a single step, and his foot cracked the reinforced concrete floor, sending a spiderweb of fractures across the surface. The feedback was a jolt of raw power that nearly sent him sprawling. The first time he tried to pick up a simple glass of water was even more humiliating. He reached for it, his mind still calibrated to his old, fragile body. The myomer in his arm engaged. His fingers, capable of crushing steel, closed around the delicate glass. It didn't just break, it detonated, exploding into a fine powder of silicon dust. Your fine motor control is non-existent, Thorne stated, observing him with a clipboard and a critical eye. You are thinking like a person, trying to feel the right amount of pressure. You no longer have that luxury. Your nerves provide basic sensory data, but the final command comes from your processor. You must learn to quantify everything. Do not pick up the glass. Calculate the object's tensile strength, mass, and fragility, then apply the precise newtons of force required to lift it without structural failure. His life became a series of calibrations. He spent weeks learning to walk, to run, to simply sit in a chair without breaking it. He had to relearn how to hold a pen, his grip now governed by micro-adjustments and force feedback sensors instead of instinct. The sensory overload was a constant battle. Thorne would disable the audio filters, forcing him to stand in the center of the lab and manually train his mind to isolate a single sound, the drip of a leaky pipe, her quiet breathing, from the overwhelming wall of noise. He spent hours staring at a blank wall, training his CPU to dial down the constant flow of data from his HUD, to clear his vision of the analytical clutter, and just see the wall. Then came the simulations. Thorne had a full immersion virtual reality system that linked directly to his neural interface. In it, she could create any scenario she wished. His first combat sim was against 5 armed thugs in a virtual warehouse. Izuku, his head still full of hero fights he'd seen on TV, charged in. He tried to mimic All Might, throwing a powerful, wide-arcing punch. The simulation registered the blow. The virtual thug he hit was vaporized. So was the wall behind him, the shipping container behind that wall, and a significant portion of the city block in the background. Result: failure. Reason: excessive force. Unacceptable collateral damage. The simulation reset. You are not All Might, Thorn's voice echoed in the virtual space, laced with disappointment. You are not a sledgehammer meant to flatten mountains. You are a scalpel, designed for precision. A sledgehammer is useless in surgery. Try again. And this time, think, he tried again. And again. And again. He failed hundreds of times. He was too strong, too fast, too clumsy. He was a hurricane in a teacup. Thorn was a relentless, unforgiving teacher. She berated him for every wasted movement, for every joule of energy expended unnecessarily, for every miscalculation. Slowly, painstakingly, something began to shift. He stopped trying to fight like the heroes he admired. He started to fight like an engineer solving a problem. He stopped seeing enemies and started seeing systems. His muttering, now a silent, lightning-fast stream of consciousness, became his greatest weapon. Target 1, armed with 9mm pistol. Trajectory analysis indicates he will fire in 0.8 seconds. My armor output at 3.2% to left leg will allow for evasion. Target 2, holding lead pipe. Structural analysis of pipe, low-grade steel. A strike at a 45-degree angle with 800 newtons of force will disarm him via vibrational shock. Target 3. His movements became economical, precise. He wasn't a brawler, he was a phantom. A blur of impossibly efficient motion. He would disable an opponent with a single, perfectly placed tap to a nerve cluster. He would disarm a gunman by striking the weapon itself at its weakest point, shattering it in their hands. He didn't throw punches, he executed solutions. Thorn moved him on to more complex simulations. Hostage situations, bomb disposals, battles against virtual opponents with powerful quirks. She taught him physics, engineering, anatomy, and strategy. He learned to use his environment, to calculate ricochet angles, to identify structural weaknesses in buildings. His mind, already analytical, became a terrifyingly potent weapon, and his body was now the tool that could execute its every command. 10 months passed in the sterile, timeless twilight of the lab. He grew taller, his frame filling out not just with the lean muscle of a teenager, but with the dense, powerful lines of the machine beneath his skin. The shy, stumbling boy was gone, stripped away layer by layer in the fire of Thorn's forge. What remained was something new, something sharp, focused, and powerful. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, he stood before a full-length mirror for the first time in almost a year. He still looked like Izuka Midoriya. His hair was the same unruly mop of green-black curls. His face still had its freckles. But his eyes were different. They were the same emerald green, but the frantic, hopeful desperation was gone. In its place was a calm, analytical depth. The gaze of a person who sees the world not as it is, but as a complex system of variables to be controlled. He was dressed in a simple tracksuit. Underneath, the faint hum of the core in his chest was a familiar, comforting presence. His HUD was a quiet ghost in his vision, ready to be called upon. Thorn stood behind him, her reflection appearing next to his in the mirror. For the first time, he saw something other than clinical detachment in her eyes. It was a flicker of pride, the pride of an engineer looking at her finished creation. They will be looking for a quirk, she said. They will see your analysis and your physical abilities, and they will be confused. They will ask you to define your power. What should I tell them? Izuka asked, his voice calm and steady. Tell them your quirk is cyberanalysis, she replied. A simple mental quirk that allows you to process information at an accelerated rate. A lie, but one rooted in the truth of your old self. It will explain your tactical acumen. The physical results, she smirked, they can attribute to a rigorous training regimen. Let them underestimate you. Let them see a smart kid who works out. They are not ready to comprehend the truth. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Her fingers were cool. Today you step onto their stage. Remember the mission. You are not there just to become a hero. You are there to prove a thesis. You are the proof that human ingenuity is superior to the genetic lottery. You are my argument, made of flesh and steel. Show them what a real hero, one built by design, can do. Izuku looked at his reflection one last time. He saw the boy who had cried on a rooftop. He saw the useless Deku who had been scorned and belittled. And then, he saw the machine that had been built to replace him. He nodded. Yes, Doctor. The time for dreams was over. It was time to execute the plan. The air outside Yuehai was electric, a crackling field of nervous energy and unbridled ambition. Thousands of teenagers, a vibrant sea of unique physiologies and bubbling quirks, milled around the grand entrance of the most prestigious hero academy in the world. Horns, wings, tails, and elemental auras created a chaotic, beautiful tapestry of human evolution. They were the genetic elite, the winners of nature's lottery, and their collective excitement was a palpable force. Izuku Midoriya walked through the crowd like a ghost. To the casual observer, he was just another nervous examinee, a boy with unruly green hair and a plain tracksuit, perhaps a bit more focused than most. But inside, he was a universe of calm, cold calculation. His enhanced auditory sensors, dialed down to a manageable level, picked up 1,000 conversations at once, boasts about powerful quirks, nervous whispers about the exam's difficulty, tearful goodbyes to parents. His visual sensors, running at a low, passive level, scanned the crowd, cataloging the myriad of powers on display. Subject 742, quirk identified as proboscis. Minor dermal mutation. Combat viability, low. Subject 743, emitting low-level thermal radiation. Probable pyrokinetic. Threat level moderate. Subject 744, possesses prehensile hair. Limited range. Tactical application, grappling, distraction. It was a constant, silent stream of data, a habit now as natural to him as breathing. Dr. Thorne had called it passive threat assessment. Izuku called it a new form of loneliness. He saw everyone as a collection of data points, a set of variables in a complex equation. He was so absorbed in his internal analysis that he almost missed the boy who stumbled in front of him. Instinct, both old and new, kicked in. His CPU calculated the boy's trajectory, his mass, his velocity. His Myanmar-laced leg shot out, not to kick, but to brace the ground. His arm moved in a blur, catching the boy's shoulder just before he hit the pavement. The motion was flawless, economical, and over in less than a second. Whoa, careful there, Izuku said, his voice perfectly even. He helped the boy straighten up. Oh! Wow, thanks. That was some fast reflex. The boy said, a bright, friendly girl with rosy cheeks and a brown bob cut. She pressed her fingertips together. Sorry about that. I'm so nervous, I could just float away. As she spoke, her feet lifted an inch off the ground. She gasped and pressed her fingers to her own cheeks, grounding herself. Subject identified, Ochako Uraraka. Quirk, zero gravity. Allows nullification of gravitational pull on objects she touches. Drawback, nausea with overuse. Izuku's internal database, cross-referenced from public records and online forums, supplied the information instantly. It's fine, Izuku replied, offering a small, practiced smile. It felt alien on his face. Good luck in there. He walked on, leaving a slightly bewildered and grateful Uraraka behind. He didn't register the interaction as a moment of kindness. He registered it as a successful field test of his fine motor control and reflex time in a dynamic, unpredictable environment. Then, a familiar, grating voice cut through the noise. Out of my way, Deku. Izuku stopped. He didn't need his sensors to identify the source. The voice was etched into his soul, a scar from 1,000 childhood wounds. He turned. Bakugo Katsuki stood there, his hands shoved in his pockets, a thunderous scowl on his face. His crimson eyes scanned Izuku up and down, a look of utter contempt mixed with a sliver of confusion. What the hell are you doing here? Bakugo snarled, his voice a low growl that made nearby students flinch. Don't tell me you're actually trying to get into UA. Did you hit your head? They don't let quirkless, worthless pebbles in the door. The old Izuku would have flinched. He would have stammered, apologized, and shrunk under the heat of that glare. The new Izuku simply stood there, his expression unreadable. His HUD flared to life, performing an involuntary scan. Subject, Katsuki Bakugo. Biometrics, heart rate, 98 BPM. Adrenaline levels elevated. Respiration accelerated. Analysis. Subject is exhibiting signs of aggression and territorial anxiety. Threat level high in confined spaces. Izuku's CPU ran a dozen conversational simulations in a microsecond. The optimal response was one that offered no purchase for Bakugo's aggression, a smooth, featureless wall for his anger to splash against. "Hello, Kaken," Izuku said, his tone perfectly level. "I'm here for the same reason as you. To take the exam?" The lack of fear, the absence of his usual stammer, threw Bakugo off for a second. He narrowed his eyes. "Don't get cocky. You're still the same useless Deku you've always been. Whatever pathetic trick you think you have, it won't be enough. Stay out of my way." Bakugo shoved past him, bumping his shoulder hard. It was a move meant to intimidate, to send Izuku stumbling. Izuku's body, now a fortress of alloy and myomer, didn't move a millimeter. It was like a child pushing against a skyscraper. Bakugo was the one who stumbled slightly from the impact, a flicker of shock crossing his face before he masked it with another sneer and stalked towards the entrance. Izuku watched him go, a silent calculation running in his mind. Bakugo's combat style relies on overwhelming offense and psychological intimidation. His quirk generates concussive force and heat, key weaknesses, close quarters grappling where he can't risk self-injury, and prolonged combat leading to fatigue and reduced sweat production. A manageable opponent. He took a deep breath, the air tasting of chemicals and exhaust fumes to his enhanced senses. He followed the crowd into the massive orientation hall. The practical exam was chaos by design. Izuku stood before the towering gates of Battle Center B, a sprawling, full-scale cityscape built for the sole purpose of being destroyed. The other examinees were a bundle of nerves and kinetic energy, stretching, bouncing, and activating their quirks in small, flashy displays. Izuku simply stood still, his eyes closed. He wasn't resting. He was listening. He had expanded his auditory sensor range, creating a three-dimensional acoustic map of the entire battle center in his mind. He could hear the low hum of the robot's standby power modes, the creak of metal joints, the subtle whine of servos. He cross-referenced the sounds with the exam briefing schematics Thorne had procured and hacked for him weeks ago. He knew the location of every 1, 2 and 3-point robot within a 10-block radius before the exam even began. President Mick's voice boomed from the watchtower. And start. For a full second, nobody moved. They were waiting for a signal, a countdown. What's the matter? President Mick's voice crackled. There are no countdowns in a real fight. Go, go, go! The gates slid open, and the crowd surged forward. They ran in a disorganized mob, a wave of shouting and raw power. Izuku did not surge with them. He let them go, a small, calm island in the tidal wave of ambition. Then he moved. He didn't run. He flowed. Pushing his myomer output to a modest 12%, he accelerated into a silent, fluid sprint. He wasn't the fastest. A boy with engines in his legs easily outpaced him, but he was the most efficient. Every footfall was perfectly placed. He weaved through the streets, his internal map guiding him, not towards the largest concentration of robots, but towards the isolated ones the main pack would miss. He rounded a corner, and came face to face with a 1-point robot. It was a squat, green machine on tank treads, its single red eye glowing as it swiveled to face him. It raised its pincer-like arms. Another examinee might have charged it, aiming a powerful blast or punch at its center mass. Izuku saw something different. His HUD instantly overlaid the robot with a translucent blue schematic. Model, VPT-1. Armor, hardened steel alloy, 5 centimeters. Weaknesses, exposed hydraulic lines in arm joints, primary logic board casing behind optical sensor, vulnerable tread actuators. The robot lunged. Izuku sidestepped with effortless grace. As the machine passed him, he didn't even look at it. His arm shot out, his fingers stiffened into a blade. He didn't use strength, he used precision. He jabbed his hand into the small gap where the robot's arm met its torso, severing the hydraulic lines with a sharp, metallic snip. High-pressure fluid sprayed out. The robot's arm went limp. It swiveled, its other arm raised to strike. Izuku was already moving. He leaped, using the wall of a building to kick off, and landed lightly on the robot's head. Before its sensor could even track him, he drove the heel of his shoe down with a calculated burst of force, not enough to crush the skull, but just enough to shatter the casing of the logic board beneath. The robot's red eye flickered and died. It coasted to a halt, inert. Villain points 1. The entire engagement had lasted 2.4 seconds. It was silent, clean, and utterly anticlimactic. This became his pattern. He moved through the city like a surgeon, not a warrior. He was a ghost in the machine. While other students were engaged in spectacular, destructive battles, leveling buildings with their powerful quirks, Izuku was a whisper. He found a two-pointer cornered in an alley, and with a single, well-placed kick, he buckled the machine's knee actuator, causing it to topple and smash its own head on the pavement. He found a three-pointer rolling down a main street and, using his enhanced senses, identified a loose manhole cover. With a quick calculation of the robot's speed and trajectory, he kicked the cover at the perfect angle. It flew up and wedged itself in the robot's wheel mechanism, causing the entire machine to flip and crash, its internal systems shorting out on impact. Villain points 1. Villain points 3. Villain points 2. Villain points 1. The points ticked up, but it felt hollow. This wasn't heroism. It was pest control. Dr. Thorne's voice echoed in his memory. Do not show them your full hand. Your goal is to pass, not to dominate. Your true power is your mind. The body is merely the tool that executes its will. He was following the mission parameters. He was accumulating points with maximum efficiency and minimum energy expenditure, but as he saw other examinees use their quirks to save each other from falling debris or team up to take down larger bots, a flicker of the old Izuku, the boy who dreamed of smiling heroes, felt a pang of something cold. This wasn't saving anyone. It was just a cold, logical exercise. In the observation room, the UA faculty watched the monitors with keen interest. Screens flickered, showing dozens of different camera angles from the various battle centers. That Bakugo kid in Battle Center A has a powerful quirk. Very flashy, but a bit reckless, commented Cementos. Indeed, Midnight purred. But look at his point total. He's a natural-born villain hunter. Principal Nizu, a small, white-furred creature with the gleam of hyperintelligence in his black eyes, steepled his paws. Power is not the only metric we measure, as you all know. His gaze shifted to a different monitor, one that Aizawa had been staring at intently for the past 5 minutes. It showed a green-haired boy in a plain tracksuit moving through Battle Center B. What do you make of this one, Eraserhead? Nizu asked, a curious lilt in his voice. Aizawa's eyes were narrowed in suspicion. Examinee 7111. Izuku Midoriya. Quirk registered as cyber-analysis. Some kind of intelligence booster. His application says it allows for high-speed tactical assessment. He's certainly not flashy, Power Loader grumbled, leaning closer to the screen. Every time we get a camera on him, he's just walking away from a disabled robot. He's not using explosions or super strength. How is he even taking them down? They rewound the footage, watching it in slow motion. They saw Izuku's impossibly precise, almost surgical movements. A jab here, a kick there. He never seemed to exert himself. He never threw a single classic punch. Look at that, Power Loader breathed, pointing at the screen. He's not destroying them. He's disabling them. He's targeting specific weaknesses. Hydraulic lines, servo motors, logic board casings. He's taking them apart like he has the blueprints memorized. Which he shouldn't, Aizawa said, his voice a low growl. Those weak points are intentionally obscured for the exam. To find them and exploit them so quickly, his analysis quirk would have to be more powerful than anything I've ever seen. Or he's cheating? Midnight suggested. I don't think so, Nizu chirped, his smile widening. He took a sip of his tea. Cheating implies breaking the rules. He is simply operating on a level of efficiency we have not seen before. He fights like an engineer, not a hero. It's fascinating. He looked at the scoreboard. But his villain point total is only average. He's being cautious. Too cautious, perhaps. Nizu's paw hovered over a large, red button on the central console. Well then, let's add a little case variable. Let's see how his analysis holds up against something that isn't on the blueprints. With a gleeful glint in his eye, he pressed the button. A deep, earth-shaking tremor rocked Battle Center B. Izuku was in the middle of disabling a two-pointer when the ground shuddered. He stabilized himself instantly, his gyroscopic sensors helping him maintain perfect balance. A sound like grinding mountains filled the air. Down the main thoroughfare, a building exploded outwards, and from the dust and debris, a colossal figure rose. The zero-pointer. It was a Goliath of green and gray metal, a robot that towered over the tallest buildings in the cityscape. Its head scraped the clouds, and its massive arms could crush a city block. It was an obstacle, not an opponent. A force of nature designed to make students scatter, and scatter they did. A wave of panic erupted as the other examinees turned and fled screaming. The zero-pointer took a step, and the street cracked under its immense weight. Its single, massive red eye scanned the area, a sensor array the size of a bus. Izuku's HUD went into overdrive, struggling to process the sheer scale of the machine. Analyzing. Error. Object exceeds standard parameters. Armor unknown composite. Power source unknown. Weaknesses scanning. This was the chaos variable. Thorn had warned him something like this might happen. Examinations are designed to test your limits. Expect the unexpected. When faced with an unknown, do not engage. Observe, analyze, withdraw. Withdrawal was the logical option. His mission was to pass. Engaging this thing served no purpose. It was worth 0 points. It was a risk with no reward. He turned to leave. Oof. Ow. The sound was small, almost lost in the cacophony of the giant's rampage. But his sensors caught it, isolated it, and identified it. It was the girl from the entrance. Uraraka. He swiveled back. His optical sensors zoomed in, piercing through the dust. She was trapped. Her leg was pinned beneath a huge slab of concrete, debris from the building the zero-pointer had smashed through. She was struggling, her face pale with pain and fear, but the slab was too heavy. The zero-pointer's shadow fell over her. It raised its massive fist, preparing to bring it down on the section of the street where she was trapped. Her fate would be an accidental footnote in its programmed path of destruction. The other examinees were running away. No heroes were coming. This was still just a test. In that instant, the cold, logical machine inside Izuku's head went silent. The mission parameters, the point totals, Thorn's warnings, they all vanished. All that remained was a single, searing image, a girl, trapped and helpless, about to be crushed. And in that image he saw Kaken in the sludge. He saw a dozen people he'd seen in news reports, trapped in fires or under rubble. He saw the core, fundamental reason he had endured 10 months of hell. Not to prove a thesis. Not to become a weapon, but to save people. A new directive, one that came not from Thorn but from the deepest part of his soul, blazed through his consciousness. Primary objective: save her. His CPU, now given a clear and absolute command, roared back to life with terrifying power. It ran 10,000 simulations in the space of a single heartbeat. Direct assault on the zero-pointer? Negative. Armor is too thick. Energy expenditure would be critical. Risk of system failure, 98.7%. Lift the debris? Feasible. Estimated mass, 7.8 metric tons. Myanmar output required, 65%. Time to execute, 4.3 seconds. Time until impact, 3.9 seconds. Negative. Insufficient time. His gaze swept the area, his mind processing every detail of the environment. The cracked pavement, the damaged buildings, the angle of the sun. He was no longer just seeing objects, he was seeing a complex physics problem. And he was the solution. New simulation, indirect environmental attack. Damaged building at coordinates 45.8, 77.2. Structural integrity, 12.4%. Key stress fracture identified at the base of the third floor support column. Object mass, approximate 200 metric tons. Trajectory analysis indicates a precision strike at the stress point with a force of 1.2 meganewtons will cause a controlled collapse. Probability of toppling zero-pointer away from the target, 89.9%. It was a plan born of insane, cold-blooded calculation. It was also his only option. He exploded into motion. "I'm coming!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. Uraraka's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and hope. Izuku pushed his Myanmar output to 40%. The world became a blur. He wasn't just running, he was practically flying, his feet barely touching the ground. He covered the 50 meters to the designated building in under 2 seconds. He didn't slow down. He leaped, his augmented legs propelling him 20 feet into the air. He twisted his body, drawing his leg back. All the energy of his motion, all the power humming from the core in his chest, was focused into a single point, the heel of his shoe. His HUD highlighted the exact point on the building's support column, a pulsing red X. He struck. The impact was not a loud explosion, but a sharp, deep crack that sounded like the world's largest bones snapping. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of tortured steel and concrete, the entire 5-story section of the building began to tilt. It fell in a perfect, controlled arc, exactly as his simulation had predicted. Not towards him, not towards Uraraka, but directly into the path of the advancing zero-pointer. The massive robot, with its limited AI and forward momentum, had no time to react. 200 tons of collapsing buildings slammed into its side. The impact was titanic. Metal shrieked and twisted. The zero-pointer, a machine of immense power but clumsy balance, staggered. It took one more step, its leg buckling under the unexpected force, and then it toppled. It fell like a felled titan, crashing down onto the street away from Uraraka, its massive frame shaking the very foundations of the city. Silence. The dust began to settle. Izuku landed lightly on the ground, a 3-point stance, steam venting from the joints in his legs from the sudden exertion. His energy reserves had dropped by 15%. A warning light flashed on his HUD. Thermal spike detected. Cooling system engaged. He ignored it. He was already sprinting towards Uraraka. The zero-pointer was down, but she was still trapped. He reached the slab of concrete, his hands easily finding purchase. "Brace yourself," he said, his voice a low pant. He didn't just lift. He calculated. He applied the force upwards and slightly to the side, rolling the slab's center of gravity. With a deep groan of effort, the 7-ton slab lifted and rolled away, landing with a heavy thud. Uraraka was free. Her ankle was clearly broken, bent at an unnatural angle. Izuku knelt beside her. "Can you move?" he asked. I think so," she gasped, her face pale. She tried to get up, but cried out in pain. Before he could decide on his next course of action, she reached out and touched his arm. "Release," she whispered. A strange, weightless sensation washed over Izuku. For a moment, his internal gyros went haywire, trying to compensate for the sudden lack of gravity affecting his body. He felt light as a feather. Uraraka had used her quirk on him, trying to help. The effort, however, made her face turn a pale shade of green, and she vomited onto the pavement. "Time's up." President Mick's voice blared across the silent city, signaling the end of the exam. Izuku stood there, the weight of the world slowly returning to him as Uraraka's quirk wore off. He looked at the disabled bots he'd taken down. He looked at the colossal, fallen form of the zero-pointer. He looked at the injured girl beside him. His villain point score was average at best. He had earned 0 points for his final, spectacular act. By the cold, hard logic of the test, he had wasted precious time and energy on a non-scoring objective. But as Recovery Girl arrived on the scene, clucking her tongue and healing Uraraka's ankle with a kiss, the girl looked up at him. Her eyes were filled with awe and gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered. "Thank you." For the first time that day, a genuine, uncalculated emotion surfaced through Izuku's cold logic. It was a warmth that had nothing to do with his fusion core. He had saved someone. He had acted like a hero, and in the observation room, the faculty was dead silent. They had all watched his final act. "My word," Power Loader murmured, staring at the screen in disbelief. Did he just take down the zero-pointer by knocking a building onto it?" His analysis. Aizawa's voice was strained, his eyes wide behind his goggles. "To calculate that under that kind of pressure. That's not just a high-speed quirk. That's something else. All might, in his skeletal form, had been watching silently from the back of the room. He had seen the boy run, the same reckless, selfless charge he had seen at the sludge villain incident. But this time, it wasn't reckless. It was precise. It was controlled. It was heroic on a level he couldn't quite comprehend, but it was Principal Nizu who was truly ecstatic. He was practically vibrating with delight, a wide, slightly terrifying grin on his furry face. "Oh, this is wonderful!" he squeaked. "Simply marvelous. Brute force is so dreadfully common. But this is intelligence as a weapon. Strategy as a superpower." He turned to the scoreboard, which still only listed the villain points. Izuku Midoriya's name was in the middle of the pack. "But of course," Nizu said, his grin widening, "we have another metric for heroism, don't we?" He pressed another button, and a new column appeared on the scoreboard, rescue points. And at the very top of that list, with a score that dwarfed everyone else's, was a single name. Izuku Midoriya, 60 rescue points. He hadn't just passed. He had redefined the test. He had achieved a calculated, and yet undeniably heroic, victory. The acceptance letter from Yui arrived a week later. It was not a simple piece of paper. It was a small, sleek disc that projected a hologram of All Might, his booming voice congratulating Izuku on his acceptance. The symbol of peace lauded his heroic spirit, his quick thinking, and the unprecedented rescue point score that had secured him the top spot in the entire exam. Izuku watched the projection with his mother, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek as she wrapped him in a hug so tight it threatened to crack his subdermal plating. "Oh, Izuku! I'm so proud of you! I knew you could do it!" She sobbed, her joy a radiant, painful thing. He hugged her back, carefully modulating the force of his Myanmar-laced arms, and offered a smile that was 92% genuine. The lie he was living felt heavier than ever in that moment of pure, unadulterated maternal love. Dr. Thorne's reaction was, predictably, more subdued. She reviewed the data from his acceptance, a full breakdown of the scoring system she had effortlessly hacked from Yue's servers, with a critical eye. 60 rescue points, she mused, pacing the sterile floor of the lab. They've rewarded your altruism. A predictable, if sentimental, response. However, your deviation from the mission parameters was risky. Her amethyst eyes narrowed. Engaging the zero-pointer was a reckless expenditure of energy, and exposed a significant portion of your capabilities. Your heat signature spiked to a level that could have been detected by military-grade sensors, had any been present. You were lucky. I saved her, Izuku stated simply, his voice quiet but firm. He was standing on a calibration platform, his body covered in sensors as Thorne ran a post-exam diagnostic. You fulfilled a secondary, humanitarian objective at the potential cost of the primary, strategic one, she corrected, her fingers flying across a holographic console. In the future you must learn to weigh those variables more effectively. Not every life can be saved, Izuku. A true hero understands triage. A dead hero saves no one. The words were cold, but he understood the logic behind them. He had acted on an impulse that felt more like his old self than his new one. It had worked this time. It might not the next. All systems are nominal, Thorne announced, finishing the diagnostic. Your performance was acceptable. Now, for the next phase, infiltration and observation. Your time at Yui will be the ultimate field test. You will be surrounded by the pinnacle of quirk expression. You will analyze them, learn their weaknesses, and prove, day in and day out, that designed evolution is superior to the genetic chaos they represent. She handed him a freshly printed Yui uniform and a student ID. On the ID, under his picture, was the section for quirk. It was filled in with the lie they had concocted. Quirk, cyberanalysis. It was vague enough to be plausible, a simple cover for the miracle of engineering humming beneath his skin. It was his mask, his shield. He was now officially Izuku Midoriya, a promising student with a useful intelligence quirk. A perfectly crafted fiction. The door to Class 1A was absurdly large, a testament to the potential variety of student physiologies Yui had to accommodate. Izuku stood before it, his internal chronometer telling him he was 5 minutes early. He ran a final systems check. Fusion core output, 15% nominal. Sensory suite, passive mode. HUD, 10% opacity. He was ready. He slid the door open and stepped inside. The classroom was already half full, a chaotic symphony of vibrant personalities. His eyes immediately fell on two familiar figures. The first was the angry, explosive epicenter of the room, Katsuki Bakugo, his feet kicked up on his desk, his face a mask of arrogant boredom. The second was a tall, well-built young man with dark blue hair and glasses who was currently marching towards Bakugo, his arms chopping the air with rigid precision. "Take your feet off that desk," the boy commanded. "Such an action is an insult to our upperclassmen and the master craftsmen who built these desks," Bakugo just sneered. "Like I care. What junior high are you from, you stuck-up extra?" Izuku's HUD immediately identified the boy. Subject, Tenya Ida. Quirk engine. Possesses biological engines in his calves, allowing for high-speed bursts. From the esteemed Ida hero family. As Ida continued his one-sided lecture, Izuku quietly made his way to his assigned seat, trying to remain unnoticed. It was a futile effort. "Hey! It's you!" He turned. Ochako Uraraka, the girl from the exam, was standing by the door, her face lit up with a brilliant smile. "Plain tracksuit at the entrance exam guy. I'm so glad you got in. Your final move was incredible. Just blowing that giant robot away." Her cheerful voice drew the attention of the entire class. Bakugo's head snapped towards him, his crimson eyes widening in disbelief and then narrowing into slits of pure fury. Ida, abandoning his crusade against Bakugo, marched over to Izuku's desk with renewed vigor. "I am Tenya Ida from Somei Private Academy," he announced, bowing at a perfect 90-degree angle. "I must apologize for my behavior at the exam. I misjudged you completely. While I deduced the true nature of the test, you were the only one who truly embodied its spirit. You are clearly the superior student." Izuku was surrounded. The attention was a spotlight, and he was an actor who had forgotten his lines. He ran a dozen social interaction simulations. The optimal response was humble and deflective. Hello, he managed, the words feeling clumsy. "My name is Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you both. I really didn't do much at the exam. I just got lucky." "Lucky?" Uraraka exclaimed. "Knocking a building onto a giant robot is lucky?" Before he could formulate a response, a new voice, low and tired, cut through the chatter from the doorway. "If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave." Everyone turned. Lying on the floor in a yellow sleeping bag, looking like a disheveled caterpillar, was a man with long, black hair and tired, bloodshot eyes. It was Shota Aizawa, the pro-hero Eraserhead. Subject, Shota Aizawa, pro-hero, Eraserhead. Quirk, erasure. Can temporarily nullify the quirks of anyone he looks at. Weakness, effect is broken by blinking. Combat style, utilizes a capture weapon made of carbon fiber and a specialized alloy. Highly efficient martial artist. Izuku's database supplied the info instantly. This man was a significant threat. His quirk was useless against Izuku's technology, but his combat prowess and intelligence were not to be underestimated. He was the definition of a logical, efficient fighter. Thorn would approve of him. Aizawa unzipped himself from the sleeping bag and rose to his feet. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. That's not going to work. Time is a precious resource." He scanned the class with a look of profound boredom. "I'm your homeroom teacher. Put these on and meet me on the field." He tossed the UA gym uniform onto his desk. The field was silent, save for the chirping of cicadas. The 20 students of Class 1A stood in a line, confused and nervous. "A quirk apprehension test?" Uraraka asked aloud. "But what about the entrance ceremony? And orientation?" "There's no time to waste on pointless pleasantries," Aizawa said, his voice flat. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its traditions are. That's how teachers run their classes as well. You've all been taking standardized tests your whole lives. But you've never been allowed to use your quirks in physical exams. It's irrational." He held up a device. "The country still insists on prohibiting quirks for standardized tests. It's not rational." He tossed a softball to Bakugo. "Bakugo, you finished first in the practical exam. What was your farthest softball throw in junior high? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa instructed. Do whatever you need to. Just stay in the circle. Bakugo grinned, a feral, predatory expression. He stretched his arms, walked into the circle, and wound up. Die! He screamed, launching the ball with a massive explosion. The blast sent a shockwave across the field. The ball became a comet, soaring high into the sky. Aizawa held up the device. It beeped. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in excited murmurs. Wow! That's incredible! We can use our quirks for real! This is going to be so much fun! Izuku remained silent. His optical sensors tracked the ball's trajectory, calculated its velocity and arc. His CPU confirmed Aizawa's reading. It was an impressive display of raw power, destructive, inefficient, but undeniably powerful. Fun? Aizawa's voice dropped, and the temperature on the field seemed to plummet with it. A dark, predatory grin spread across his face. You think this is fun? You have 3 years here to become a hero. You think it's all going to be games and fun? Idiots. His hair began to float, his eyes glowing a malevolent red. Today, you will compete in 8 physical tests to gauge your potential. Whoever comes in last place will be judged to have no potential and will be expelled immediately. Panic rippled through the class. Expelled? On the first day? That's not fair. Uraraka cried out. Natural disasters, massive villain attacks, unforeseen calamities. Is any of that fair? Aizawa countered, his voice cold as steel. The world is not a fair place. It's our job as heroes to combat that unfairness. For the next 3 years, you will throw one hardship after another at you. So go beyond. Plus ultra. Overcome it with all you've got. The threat was real. Izuku's CPU analyzed Aizawa's biometrics, speech patterns, and past disciplinary records, which Thorn had, of course, provided. Probability of genuine expulsion, 87.4%. This is a logical ruse to push students to their absolute limits. Even so, the directive was clear: do not come in last. The first test was a 50-meter dash. Izuku was paired with Ida. As they took their positions, Ida's calves morphed, vents and exhaust pipes sprouting from the muscle. Ida's quirk provides rapid, linear acceleration. Izuku's mind raced. Optimal strategy is not to compete on raw speed, but to demonstrate efficiency. The starting gun fired. Ida shot forward like a bullet, crossing the line in 3.04 seconds. Izuku moved a split second later. He didn't use the explosive power he was capable of. Instead, he optimized. He calculated the perfect angle for his launch, the most aerodynamic posture, the precise amount of force needed in each stride to maintain momentum without wasted energy. He crossed the line in 4.13 seconds. It was fast, inhumanly so for a normal person, but nowhere near his true potential. It was just good enough to place him in the upper third of the class rankings, a performance easily attributable to a rigorous training regimen. Next, the grip strength test. A large, muscular boy with multiple arms, Mizo Shoji, scored an incredible 540 kilograms. Izuku took the dynamometer. His HUD scanned the device. Maximum reading, 600 kilograms. Internal strain gauges will break at approximate 650 kilograms. He squeezed. He didn't use his full strength, which could have turned the device into a twisted ball of metal. He simply pushed it until the digital display read 580 kilograms. It was enough to cause a stir, but not enough to seem impossible. Whoa, Midoriya! That's insane! A red-haired, spiky-haired boy named Kirishima exclaimed. What are you made of, steel? Izuku offered a small, practiced smile. Just lots of training. The lie was getting easier. He continued this pattern throughout the tests. In the standing long jump, he cleared the sandbox with a precisely calculated leap. In the side-to-side steps, his movements were a blur of efficiency. He performed just well enough to stay near the top, but never in a way that screamed superhuman. He was a master of controlled mediocrity, a cyborg hiding in plain sight. He was the smart kid who worked out, just as Thorn had planned. All the while, he observed. He watched as a girl named Momo Yaorozu created a cannon from her skin to launch her ball. He saw Shoto Todoroki, the son of the number 2 hero Endeavor, freeze the ground to skate across it. He catalogued every quirk, every application, every limitation. His mind was a silent, whirring database, and this was the richest data trove he had ever encountered. Then came the final test, the ball throw. The one that had made Bakugo a star. When it was Uraraka's turn, she touched the ball, nullifying its gravity, and threw it. It sailed up, and up, and up, disappearing into the sky. Aizawa's device beeped, showing an infinity symbol. The class was impressed. Izuku was too. It was a simple, elegant, and brilliantly clever application of her quirk. Finally, it was his turn. He stepped into the circle, the soft ball feeling absurdly light in his hand. Everyone was watching. This was the one test where raw power was the most obvious metric. How could he, with his analysis quirk, compete? He could throw it into orbit. A simple calculation, a 30% Myanmar output, and the ball would break the escape velocity. But that would shatter the masquerade. It would be an act of impossible strength that no amount of training could explain. Optimal strategy: replicate the methodology of the entrance exam. Utilize intelligence and physics, not brute force. He took his stance. He closed his eyes for a moment. His internal sensors analyzed the air. Wind speed, 3.2 meters per second from the ESC. Humidity, 48%. Barometric pressure, 101.2 kilopascals. His CPU ran 1,000,000 ballistic simulations in under a second, factoring in air resistance, spin, the Magnus effect, and the curvature of the Earth. It calculated the single, perfect combination of angle, velocity, and rotation that would yield the maximum possible distance. He opened his eyes. He wound up, his motion a perfect, fluid spiral of kinetic energy. His arm was not a limb. It was a perfectly calibrated launch platform. He released the ball not with a grunt or a yell, but with a quiet, sharp snap of his wrist, imparting a ferocious topspin. The ball didn't rocket away like Bakugo's. It flew with an unnatural stability, a white speck cutting through the air in a perfect, soaring parabola, almost as if it were flying on its own. It seemed to hang in the air for an impossible amount of time before finally descending, far, far in the distance. Aizawa held up his device. The class held its breath. A beep. 705.3 meters. The field went dead silent. 0.1 meters. He had beaten Bakugo by 10 centimeters. He hadn't done it with an explosion. He hadn't done it with super strength. He had done it with math. It was a declaration of war, written in the language of physics. Bakugo's face went from disbelief to incandescent rage. DKU! He roared, smoke pouring from his palms. How the hell did you do that? What is your quirk? You've been lying to me. He lunged, his hands sparking, ready to blast Izuku into oblivion. Before he could take 2 steps, he was jerked to a halt. Aizawa's capture weapon had wrapped around him, tight as a python. Aizawa's eyes were glowing red, his hair floating. Stand down. Aizawa's voice was dangerously calm. I'm getting dry-eyed just looking at you people. Stop making me use my quirk over and over. He released the stunned and seething Bakugo. We're wasting time. Here are the results. A holographic leaderboard appeared. Izuku was in first place. And at the very bottom, in 20th place, was Minoru Mineta, a short boy with purple balls on his head, who was currently weeping. And by the way, Aizawa said, a lazy grin spreading across his face as he dismissed the hologram. I was lying about the expulsion. It was a logical ruse to make you do your best. The class erupted in a mixture of relief and outrage. Only Yaorozu and Izuku seemed unfazed. Probability of deception was high, Izuku thought, his biometrics remaining perfectly level. As the class started heading back to the locker rooms, Aizawa's voice stopped him. Midoriya. Izuku turned. The teacher's gaze was sharp, analytical, and deeply suspicious. Your performance was interesting, Aizawa said, his eyes narrowed. Your registered quirk is cyberanalysis. Explain how that allowed you to throw a ball 705.3 meters. This was the moment. The first real test of his cover story. My quirk allows me to process variables at an extremely high speed, sir, Izuku explained, his voice steady, his heart humming at a calm 15% output. For the throw, I calculated the optimal launch angle, spin rate, and release velocity to maximize its travel distance by minimizing air resistance. The physical result is due to a specialized training regimen I've been on for the past year to strengthen my body to be able to execute the solutions my mind comes up with. It was a beautiful lie. Believable, technical, and impossible to disprove without a full medical workup. Aizawa stared at him for a long, silent moment. Izuku met his gaze without flinching. Inside, his CPU was analyzing Aizawa's micro-expressions. Skepticism, 78%. Curiosity, 21%. Belief, 1%. Finally, Aizawa grunted. A training regimen, huh? We'll see how well that holds up. He turned and walked away, his capture weapon settling around his neck. Izuku watched him go. He had passed the test. Aizawa didn't believe him, not really, but he had no proof. The lie had held. He turned to head back, and found himself face to face with a pair of intense, mismatched eyes, one turquoise, one gray. Shoto Todoroki stood there, his expression as cold and unreadable as a glacier. Your power, Todoroki said, his voice a low monotone. It feels cold. Calculated. Like my old man's. Izuku's HUD analyzed him. Subject, Shoto Todoroki. Biometrics. Left side temperature slightly elevated. Right side slightly depressed. Body is in a constant state of thermoregulation. Analysis. Subject is emotionally repressed. High potential for instability. It's just my quirk, Izuku replied evenly. Todoroki stared at him for a moment longer, then turned and walked away without another word. The interaction was brief, but it was clear Izuku had made an impression on more than just Aizawa and Bakugo. He finally made it back to the locker room. The mood was boisterous and relieved. Kirishima clapped him on the shoulder, a friendly but solid blow. Dude, that was so manly, beating Bakugo with just brains and muscle. You're a beast. Izuku just nodded, offering another small smile. He felt a profound sense of dislocation. He was surrounded by his classmates, these vibrant, powerful, emotional people. They were laughing, joking, forming the bonds that would last a lifetime. And he was an outsider, a spy wearing a human face. He analyzed their laughter, quantified their camaraderie, but he couldn't feel it. He was in Class 1A. He was ranked first. He had succeeded in every possible way, but as he changed out of his gym uniform, catching a glimpse of the faint, almost invisible seam lines on his own skin under the fluorescent lights, he had never felt more alone. He was a machine pretending to be a boy, surrounded by demigods. This was his new life. A calculated victory in a war of one. The air in the monitoring room was thick with anticipation. All Might, in his magnificent hero form, stood before a bank of screens, his signature smile beaming at the students of Class 1A, now clad in their freshly delivered hero costumes. Welcome, young heroes, to the most important class in UA High. Today, we will be combat training, he announced, his voice a thunderous boom that vibrated through the room. And for that, you need these. Wall panels slid open, revealing numbered cases containing their costumes. A ripple of excitement went through the class. This was the moment they had all dreamed of, the first time they would truly look and feel like heroes. Izuku found his case, number 17. He opened it. Dr. Thorne had designed his costume, and it was a masterpiece of subtle, pragmatic engineering. It was a full-body suit of a dark, forest green, interwoven with a non-Newtonian fluid armor that hardened on impact. The lines were sleek, broken up by plates of black composite armor on his forearms, shins, and torso. The most striking features were the helmet and the mask. The mask was a metal respirator that covered the lower half of his face, designed to filter toxins but also to hide his expressions, and it rose into two long, rabbit ear-like protrusions. Thorne had insisted on them, calling them an integrated communications and sensory array. But Izuku knew she had also modeled them after All Might's iconic hair tufts, a small, almost cruel joke. The helmet's visor was a smooth, opaque black, behind which his HUD could operate without any external giveaway. He looked nothing like the fanba who had scribbled drawings in a notebook. He looked like a soldier. An urban pacification unit. He looked weaponized. When they emerged from the tunnel into the training ground, a sprawling cityscape designated Ground Beta, the contrast between Izuku and his classmates was stark. Kirishima was bare-chested and rugged, Ida looked like a knight from a sci-fi epic, and Uraraka was in a puffy, pink and black spacesuit. They looked like characters from a comic book. Izuku looked like he had stepped out of a Spec Ops unit from the future. They say the clothes make the man, young men and women. And behold, you are the proof. You all look so cool. All Might boomed. As his gaze swept the class, it lingered for a moment on Izuku. The hero's smile faltered almost imperceptibly. Izuku's costume was practical, efficient, and utterly devoid of the bright, smiling optimism All Might championed. It was a costume for a fighter, not a savior. All Might quickly recovered, launching into an explanation of the day's trial. It was a classic scenario, heroes versus villains 2-on-2. The villains would guard a nuclear weapon prop inside a building, and the heroes would have to either capture the bomb or subdue both villains within a time limit. Your partners and opponents will be chosen by lottery. All Might declared, pulling out 2 boxes. The teams were drawn one by one. Team B, Todoroki and Shoji. Team A, Ojiro and Hagakure. Izuku watched, his processor silently running probability matrices on potential matchups. Then came his name. Team A will be Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka. Uraraka beamed, giving him a thumbs up. Wow, what a coincidence. Let's do our best, Midoriya-kun. Izuku gave a slight nod. Partner Uraraka. Quirk, zero gravity. Asset in mobility and objective retrieval. Liability in direct combat. Optimal strategy. Utilize her for infiltration and objective handling, while I engage hostiles. He was processing the variables when the next team was called, and the temperature in the room dropped. And their opponents, on Team D, will be Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida. A dead silence fell over the group. Everyone knew the history, the explosive rivalry, or rather, the one-sided bullying, between Midoriya and Bakugo. This wasn't just a training exercise anymore. This was a grudge match. Bakugo's face twisted into a grin that was all teeth, a terrifying expression of pure, predatory joy. His eyes locked onto Izuku, and they were no longer just angry. They were filled with a murderous light. This is perfect, he growled, his voice a low, crackling hiss. I finally get to shut your mouth for good, you damn nerd. Izuku's expression, hidden behind his helmet's dark visor, remained unchanged. His biometrics, however, told a different story. His core temperature ticked up by a fraction of a degree. His fusion core's output climbed from 15% to a steady 25%. Opponent Bakugo. Psychological state, unstable, highly aggressive. Will prioritize personal conflict over team objective. Predictable, but dangerous. Opponent Ida. Psychological state, methodical, rule-abiding. Will prioritize objective defense. Tactical liability due to rigid thinking. Threat analysis. Bakugo is the primary combat threat. Neutralize him first. All Might, sensing the palpable tension, clapped his hands together. All right. Team A, you'll be the heroes. Team D, the villains. Everyone else, to the monitoring room. Villains, you have 5 minutes to prepare. As Bakugo and Ida headed into the target building, Uraraka turned to Izuku, her expression worried. Deku, I mean, Midoriya-kun, Bakugo-kun seems really angry. Are you going to be okay? We should probably try to avoid him and just go for the weapon. Izuku unrolled a schematic of the building on a datapad. Thorn had supplied him with the blueprints for every UA training facility. Avoidance is a sound strategy, he said, his voice slightly distorted by the mask's modulator, giving it a cool, metallic edge. But it's not viable. Bakugo won't be defending the objective. He'll be hunting me. Uraraka paled. Hunting you? But why? It's irrelevant, Izuku stated. He pointed to the blueprint. The weapon is likely on one of the upper floors. Bakugo will engage me on a lower floor to isolate me. His quirk is most effective in enclosed spaces where he can control movement and maximize blast pressure. This works to our advantage. While he's focused on me, you will proceed to the objective. Ida will be guarding it alone. Your quirk is the perfect counter for a stationary defender and a heavy object. Uraraka looked at him, her eyes wide. He wasn't talking like a nervous classmate anymore. He was talking like a seasoned mission commander. The plan was cold, logical, and it used both of them to their greatest strengths. It also meant he would be facing Bakugo alone. Can you do it? She asked, her voice a whisper. Can you face him? Izuku looked up from the blueprint, his black visor reflecting her worried face. Yes, he said, with no trace of doubt. I have the data. Inside the building, on the 5th floor, Ida was meticulously clearing the room of any potential debris the heroes could use as weapons. He had fully embraced his role as a villain. Bakugo-kun, we should formulate a defensive strategy. He called out, his voice echoing in the empty concrete chamber. I will remain here to guard the weapon. You should patrol the lower floors and— Shut up, Four Eyes, Bakugo snarled. He was stretching, his muscles coiling, his grin never leaving his face. This has nothing to do with you or this stupid bomb. This is about that damn Deku. What are you talking about? Ida asked, confused. This is a team exercise. We must work together to achieve victory. The only victory I care about is wiping that smug, empty look off his face, Bakugo spat. He cracked his knuckles, a shower of tiny sparks erupting from his palms. All these years, he was a worthless, quirkless pebble. A nothing. And then he shows up at Yui with a quirk, looking down on me, beating me in the fitness test. He's been lying. All this time, he's been hiding his power, laughing at me behind my back. Well, the laughing stops today. I'm going to beat him so bad he'll never be able to look at me again. He stalked towards the door, ignoring Ida's protests. His mind was a storm of rage and betrayal. Deku, the pathetic Deku, had a powerful quirk. He had to. There was no other explanation, and today, Bakugo was going to force him to use it, to show his true colors. Then, he would crush it. He would prove, once and for all, that he was the strongest. Begin! All Might's voice echoed from their earpieces. Izuku and Uraraka entered the building through a ground-floor window. The interior was a labyrinth of dark corridors and empty rooms. Izuku immediately activated his enhanced sensory suite. Acoustic mapping. Complete. 5 floors, 1 basement. 2 life signs detected. Target 1, Ida Tenya. Location, 5th floor, central chamber. Stationary. Target 2, Bakugo Katsuki. Location, 3rd floor, corridor C. Moving. Vector intercept. He's coming. Izuku's voice was a low murmur. As predicted. Uraraka-san, go. Use the western staircase. It's the furthest from his current position. Maintain radio silence until you locate the objective. Right. Be careful, Midoriya-kun. She whispered, and then she was gone, a silent pink and black shadow disappearing up the stairwell. Izuku was alone. He stood perfectly still in the center of the corridor, a dark green sentinel in the gloom. He could hear Bakugo's footsteps, 2 floors up. Hasty, aggressive, uneven. He could hear the faint crackle of nitroglycerin sweat igniting in his palms. He could hear the ragged, angry breaths. Target is approaching. Adrenaline levels are critical. Combat effectiveness will be high, but tactical reasoning will be compromised. He is a monster of pure instinct. Izuku adjusted his stance. He didn't brace for a fight. He settled into a state of active analysis, his entire body a sensory platform, his mind a silent storm of calculations. This was not a brawl between rivals. This was a man with a scalpel preparing to dissect a raging beast. The footsteps grew louder. A door burst open a floor below, the sound echoing up the stairwell. He was close. Izuku waited. The silence stretched, taut and heavy. Then, an explosion ripped through the wall to his left. Bakugo came flying through the dust and debris, his hand outstretched, a sadistic grin on his face. Found you, Deku! The blast was meant to be a surprise attack, to disorient and overwhelm. But Izuku had heard the telltale spike in Bakugo's heart rate, had seen a thermal bloom through the wall a split second before the explosion. He was already moving. He didn't dodge. He flowed. He moved with the blast, letting the concussive force guide his evasion, a matador using the bull's own momentum against it. He pivoted on his heel, the edge of the explosion just searing the air where he had been standing. Bakugo landed, his grin faltering for a microsecond at the sight of an empty patch of floor. Still hiding? Still running? Bakugo roared, swiveling. Izuku was behind him. Predictable, his modulated voice stated calmly. Bakugo spun, unleashing another explosion. This time, Izuku didn't just dodge. His HUD highlighted Bakugo's wrist, the slight twitch of the muscle that preceded the detonation. Izuku dropped low, the blast passing harmlessly over his head, and swept his leg out. The motion was not designed to trip Bakugo, but to force him to use another blast to regain his balance, propelling himself into the air. Energy expenditure, Bakugo, 12%. Midoriya, 2%. Stand still and fight me, you coward! Bakugo screamed from midair, righting himself with a series of small, controlled explosions. Fighting you is not the objective, Izuku replied, his voice a maddeningly calm counterpoint to Bakugo's fury. However, your continued presence is a tactical obstacle. This was Thorn's training in action. De-escalate, analyze, neutralize. But Izuku knew this wouldn't work on Bakugo. He wasn't just neutralizing an obstacle. He was trying to dismantle a bomb that was already lit. And every calm, logical word he spoke was just shortening the fuse. He was right. His calmness drove Bakugo into a frenzy. Bakugo landed and charged, not even bothering with ranged attacks. He wanted to feel this. He wanted to pummel the truth out of Deku. He swung a wide right hook, his palm crackling. Izuku's CPU analyzed the attack in a nanosecond. Right hook. High power, low precision. Leaves left flank exposed for 0.6 seconds. Izuku swayed back, the heat of Bakugo's explosive punch washing over his mask. As Bakugo's arm passed, Izuku stepped in, inside his guard. He didn't punch. He didn't kick. He brought his hand up, fingers stiff, and jabbed 2 precise points, the brachial plexus in Bakugo's shoulder, and the radial nerve in his forearm. It wasn't a powerful strike. It was a perfectly applied pinprick of force, a move learned from a medical database. Bakugo's arm went instantly numb. The crackling explosions died. A look of pure shock replaced the rage on his face as his arm hung limply at his side. He had never felt anything like it. It wasn't pain. It was absence. What did you do? He stammered. Targeted nerve strike, Izuku explained coolly. Temporary motor function paralysis. The feeling will return in approximately 45 seconds. In the monitoring room, the other students were speechless. All Might gripped the railing, his smile completely gone. What had he just seen? Midoriya hadn't overpowered Bakugo. He had disassembled him. Bakugo, however, was not so easily defeated. He was a creature of pure combat instinct. With a roar of fury, he swung with his left arm, an explosion erupting that was twice as large as the previous ones. The temporary disability of his right arm had just made him angrier. Izuku was already moving back, anticipating the more desperate, more powerful attack. The entire fight was a dance he had already choreographed in his mind. He evaded, he analyzed, he countered. He never met force with force. He was a ghost, a matador, a surgeon. He used Bakugo's rage, his predictability, his raw, untamed power, as a weapon against him. He used his capture weapon, a set of high-tensile wires stored in his gauntlets, an homage to his new favorite teacher, Aizawa, to snag Bakugo's leg, sending him tumbling. He used the building's support columns to ricochet and change direction, making his movements impossible to track. For 5 minutes, the battle raged. Or rather, Bakugo raged. Izuku simply was. He was the unmovable object to Bakugo's unstoppable force. And it was driving Bakugo insane. Fight me, DKU! Bakugo screamed, his voice raw, his uniform singed, his face streaked with sweat and grime. Stop dodging and show me. Show me the quirk you've been hiding from me all this time. Izuku stopped. He stood 20 feet away, his dark green form still pristine, untouched. There is no hidden quirk, Kaken. Liar! Bakugo roared. He raised his right arm. The feeling had returned. He aimed the massive grenade-like gauntlet on his arm directly at Izuku. Young Bakugo, don't! You'll kill him! All Might's voice shouted in their earpieces. He'll be fine if he dodges. Bakugo yelled back, a manic light in his eyes. He pulled the pin. Izuku's sensors went haywire. The amount of nitroglycerin sweat stored in that gauntlet was immense. The thermal signature was off the charts. His HUD flashed a dozen red warnings. Warning: catastrophic explosive event imminent. Evasion is insufficient. Brace for impact. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku's CPU ran its final, desperate calculation. There was no escape. The blast radius would encompass the entire corridor, so he didn't run. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, channeling all available power from his core into the composite plates on his forearms and the non-Newtonian fluid armor in his suit. He planted his feet, his reinforced skeleton locking into place. My armor output, 80%. System integrity diverted to forward shielding. He would take it. Head on. Howitzer impact. A sun bloomed in the corridor. A wave of unimaginable force and heat tore through the building, blowing out every window on the floor and sending a plume of fire and smoke billowing into the sky outside. The entire building shook on its foundations. In the monitoring room, everyone screamed. All Might was about to leap into action, to end the match, to save his potential successor from being vaporized. But then, the smoke on the monitor began to clear. Bakugo was panting, his arms smoking, a look of triumphant victory on his face. But as the dust settled, his expression turned to one of absolute, soul-shattering disbelief. Izuku was still standing. His arms were still crossed in a defensive X. The armor on his gauntlets was blackened and cracked, glowing with residual heat. Steam vented from his joints with a loud hiss. His suit was scorched. A massive, V-shaped gouge was carved into the floor and walls behind him, marking the path of the explosion he had just weathered, but he was standing. Unmoved. System warning: thermal overload imminent. Core temperature at 115%. Armor integrity at 34%. Izuku lowered his arms. His black visor stared at Bakugo, an empty, soulless void. That was your most powerful attack, his modulated voice stated, flat and devoid of emotion. It was insufficient. That broke something in Bakugo. The rage, the confidence, the arrogance, it all shattered like glass, replaced by a raw, primal fear. The thing standing in front of him wasn't Deku. Deku was weak. Deku was a pebble. This was a monster. A monster that couldn't be hurt. While Bakugo was frozen in shock, Uraraka's voice crackled in Izuku's earpiece. Midoriya-kun! I've found it! It's on the 5th floor, but Ida-kun he's really fast. I can't get close. New objective received. Izuku's directive shifted. Bakugo was no longer a threat. He was a stunned obstacle. It was time to end it. He pushed off, his movements now faster, more aggressive. He closed the distance in a blur. Bakugo, still reeling, instinctively threw a panicked, sloppy punch. Izuku ducked under it, pivoted, and drove his fist forward. But he didn't aim for Bakugo's face or chest. He aimed for the ceiling. His fist, powered by 50% Myanmar output, slammed into the concrete above. It didn't just crack it. It pulverized it. A massive hole exploded upwards, debris raining down. Izuku repeated the motion on the next ceiling, and the next, creating a vertical shaft straight through the center of the building. Uraraka-san! He yelled into his calm now. On the 5th floor, Ida and Uraraka were in a stalemate. Ida was too fast for her to touch the bomb. But as the ceiling above him exploded, he looked up in shock. In that split second of distraction, Uraraka saw her chance. She slapped her hands on the massive support pillar next to her. Release! She yelled. Then, with a mighty heave, she swung the now weightless, multi-ton concrete pillar like a baseball bat, right into Ida's back. The surprised boy was sent flying across the room. At the same time, Izuku looked up through the holes he had created. He could see the 5th floor. He could see the bomb. He crouched, channeling the last of his usable energy into his legs. Myanmar output, 90%. Warning, structural integrity of leg actuators compromised. He ignored the warning. He launched himself upwards, a green rocket ascending through the floors. He passed the 3rd floor, where Bakugo stood, mouth agape. He passed the 4th floor. He burst onto the 5th floor, sailing over a stunned Ida and a cheering Uraraka. He flew past the nuclear weapon prop and placed his hand gently on the wall behind it. Heroes win, his calm, modulated voice declared. A klaxon blared through the building, signaling the end of the match. Izuku landed softly, steam pouring from every joint in his body. The world tilted, his vision glitching as red warning signs flooded his HUD. System failure imminent. Emergency shutdown in 10. 9. He stumbled. Uraraka rushed to his side. Midoriya-kun! Are you okay? That was amazing, he couldn't answer. He looked across the room at Bakugo, who had just arrived on the floor, his face a pale, horrified mask. Izuku had won. He had proven his superiority. But he felt no triumph. He had just confirmed Bakugo's worst fear, that he, Deku, was no longer human. He was something else entirely. Something to be feared. His legs gave out. The world faded to black as his systems went into emergency shutdown. The last thing he heard was All Might's frantic, worried voice shouting his name. He had won the battle, but the true cost of his victory was only just beginning to be calculated.